What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Reality Roundtable. I'm your host, Jonathan Brown, and today, let me ask you something real quick. When was the last time you took a loss in life? Not the funny kind, not the ha, that was awkward kind. I mean a real loss, a rejection, a failure, a moment where you tried and it just didn't work. Most of us avoid these moments like the plague. We hide them and we don't post them. We don't talk about them. But today, we're going to do the opposite of that. Because taking a loss might actually be one of the most important things you learn how to do in life. This episode is about job rejections, getting fired, being told no, missing the shot, failing publicly, and why every single winner you admire has gone through it first. If you're in a season where things aren't going your way, this episode is for you. And let's talk about why losing feels very personal. From a young age, we're all taught that winning equals value, good grades, first place, likes, promotions, and titles. So when we lose, it feels like a statement about who we are, not just what happened. You didn't just get rejected. You are rejected. That's the lie, though. Losing doesn't mean you're incapable. It means you participated. It means you stepped into the arena instead of watching from the sidelines like most people ever do. Most people never even try. They just critique the people who do try. Now let's start with one of the most common losses out there in the world. Job rejections. Job rejections hit really hard, especially when you thought the interview went well, you needed the money, and you were excited about the opportunity. And after all that happens, you start planning your life around the job that you're potentially going to get, only to hear back that we decided to go in another direction. And don't get me started about getting fired. That one can mess with your identity. But here's the truth in all that. A job rejecting you doesn't mean you lack value. It means there just wasn't alignment, skills, timing, culture, or budget. Some of the most successful people alive have gotten rejected dozens of times, have gotten fired, or they've been told that they just weren't a good fit for the job, even though they have the qualifications for the job that they applied for. Sometimes getting fired is life redirecting you, or it could just mean that your timing really is up at that place and that it's just really setting you up for a greater opportunity in life. And sometimes it's the wake-up call that you didn't want, but you actually needed. Now let's shift to some personal L's. Asking somebody out. You hype yourself up, your heart's racing, and you finally say something. And then, boom, you get that dreaded no. Rejection stings because it feels exposed, vulnerable, and personal. But here's the win inside that loss that you actually took. You actually built courage. You practiced confidence. And you proved to yourself you can survive some discomfort. The people who seem fearless, they just been rejected more times than you ever know. And let's switch gears a little bit. Starting something new on your own is one of the fastest ways that you can collect losses in your life. Business ideas that don't work, content that flops, or plans that just fall apart. But every expert was once a beginner. Every winner started somewhere. You don't skip the messy phase. You earn your way through it. Failure isn't the opposite of success. It's the tuition of success. And it's a tuition that has to be paid. Now here's something that people also don't talk enough about. taking losses actually builds your self-esteem. And you want to know why? Because confidence doesn't come from always winning. It comes from knowing that you'll be okay even when you do lose. You become harder to break. You stop taking things personally, and you also learn to brush things off. That's real strength. And let's just be honest. The real world does not hand out participation trophies. Not everybody in the world is going to like you. You're not going to be everybody's cup of tea. Not everybody's going to support you, whether that be friends, family, or your colleagues. Some of your biggest supporters may be people you don't even know. And also, competition sharpens you. Losses teach you where you can improve. Every winner has failed at something in life. Nobody goes through life winning 100% of the time. Every champion has taken L's in private that you never saw. Also, a loss is only a loss, really, if you didn't learn from it. Now ask yourself, what went wrong? What can I control next time? What did this teach me? Growth lives in reflection. And you don't need to beat yourself up. You just need to level yourself up. Now, let's go deeper with that. Nobody talks about what happens after the loss occurs. The quiet moments, the overthinking, the replaying the moment in your head. And I don't know if it's just me, but does anybody else also, when things go wrong in your life, does anybody else tend to think about, oh man, like I really could have done this, or your best ideas come to you after something went wrong? Maybe it's just me. I don't know. But this is where emotional resilience is built. Resilience isn't pretending it didn't hurt. It's letting it hurt without letting it define you. You're allowed to feel disappointed when you lose. And also, you're allowed to feel frustrated. But you're not allowed to get stuck there if you truly want to progress in life. And also, one of the biggest lessons that losses teach us is separation. You're not going to always get the best results. You're not going to always get the outcome that you want. You're not your results. You're not the outcome. You are the effort, the intent, and also the growth. When you attach your identity to outcomes, every loss feels like an attack on you. But when you detach yourself from all of that, you actually gain a sense of freedom. You stop being afraid to try something new. Now, let's talk about comparisons when it comes to losses. You may get on your phone, you may start scrolling and seeing that everybody is winning. It may feel like you're taking a loss that you didn't sign up for. But comparison steals context. You don't see those people's failures. You don't see those people's delays. You don't see those people's days off. And you don't see what goes on in private. Everybody's timeline is different. So honestly, stay in your lane. Your time is coming, but you have to keep working at it. You have to give yourself a chance so that when your time does come, you're ready to meet the moment. And some people tend to quit after they take a loss. But that loss could be the wake-up call that other people need to get refocused. The difference is what they do with it. A loss can either drain you or it can drive you. Really no in between when it comes to that. Now ask yourself, What can this push me towards? Turn that disappointment from the loss into the discipline that you need so that you can take a win next time. And sometimes it's not just one loss in life. It's rejection after rejection after rejection after rejection. And that's when the doubt within yourself tends to be the loudest. But a lot of stacked up losses doesn't mean stop. It just means you have to adjust. Even seasons of drought end. And also, winning isn't always loud. Sometimes winning looks like not quitting, staying consistent, and even showing up when you're tired. Progress counts, even when it's quiet. At some point, even serious people experience ego deaths. That moment where who you thought you were doesn't match up to the result that you're getting. And that hurts. But the death of your ego can also be somewhat of a rebirth. When the ego falls away, you stop needing validation and you stop chasing the applause and you start chasing mastery. That's where growth accelerates. Losses humble you, and humility keeps you learning. The most dangerous mindset is thinking that you already know enough. Taking losses keeps you sharp. It also reminds you that there's always another level that you can reach. Quiet confidence beats loud insecurity every time. And let's be honest, losing seasons can feel lonely. People check in less, the support gets quieter, but solitude isn't punishment. It's honestly preparation. This is where the discipline forms. And this is where the self-trust is built. Motivation fades, but discipline stays. Losses teach you how to work without hype, how to show up when no one is watching. That skill separates professionals from amateurs. Some doors close loudly, others quietly fade. Rejection isn't denial. Sometimes it's protection. Maybe that environment would not have been right for you. And instead of you having to go through all that pain, that rejection helped you avoid that in the beginning, and you saved any time that you were actually going to waste. You don't see the misalignment, but you will. Trust that redirection. And some losses happen because you've outgrown who you used to be. You've outgrown those old habits, those old environments, and those old expectations. You ever have times where you go visit people from your past and you've changed into a whole new person and they still expect you to be the same person that you were from the past, but that's just not you anymore? That's what that could be like. And also, losses forces evolution. Growth requires letting go. Whether that's old habits, whether that's old people, or that's old environments. And let's just be real. Pain is honest. It tells you what matters, and it shows you where you can improve. Avoiding pain delays growth. Listening to it accelerates the wisdom that you need. And when it comes to taking losses can build mental toughness. And mental toughness isn't born, it's trained. Every loss adds weight to the bar. And over time, you get stronger, not because it's easy, but because you stayed. But the wins hit differently though. Especially when you earn them. You become calmer, you become more grateful, and you become less arrogant. And also, the losses that you took, they'll give your successes more meaning. So zoom out. This moment, it won't define you, but how you respond might. Legacy is built in unseen moments. So choose resilience and choose growth. And let me make one last point when it comes to being able to take a loss, and one of the most important lessons that you should be able to learn. It's also better to sometimes take your loss early on than it is later on in the process, because when you take the loss early on, you'll be able to mitigate the damage and limit the damage that would be caused to you if you were to take the loss early, rather than if you were to be able to take the loss late. And I'll give you an example of that. There was one time I was going through the job searching process, and I got through the initial phone interview, and then I got to a second interview. The second interview happened less than 10 minutes away from my apartment, right down the street. When I get to the interview, the interviewer told me that you're just at the second of 7 rounds of interviews. And when he told me that, in my mind, I was dumbfounded. But the interview went on. I thought the interview went well, but he told me that I wasn't moving on to the next round. Now, while I was disappointed in not being able to move on to the next round, I was also relieved not to have to go through all 7 rounds of interviews just to get a job. But I'll give you an example of when I made it to the final round and I still didn't get the job. So there was this one time I applied for a job, and I got an initial call for it in May. I got an initial call for the job in April while I was at the gym. We did the initial call. Next thing you know, I get set up with the area manager for the job, who I actually still respect to this day because he actually vouched for me during the whole job process. We talk. I don't hear from this guy for like a month. And then after a month of talking, he then sets me up for the final interview, which would take place like maybe a week or 2 later. Now, mind you, during the final interview had to be in person. They made it a big thing for the final interview to be in person. And also, the final interview was an hour and a half away from where I live. And I had to be there by 10 o'clock in the morning. And where I stay is near I-26. And if you know anything about I-26, I-26 has bad traffic and it has narrow lanes. Mind you, I got to this interview 30 minutes early. So that tells you how early I had to leave to get to this interview. And next thing you know, the interview goes well. I asked them, is there anything from this interview that would give you hesitation from giving me the job? They say no. I wait until the next week to find out that they ended up hiring somebody else because, quote unquote, they just had more experience. Now, can you imagine how mad I was going an hour and a half away early in the morning just to be told that I didn't get the job after waiting almost 2 to 3 months just to hear back a response from the initial interview? Now, both situations ended up with the same result, but at least one gave me the no early on, so I wasn't as mad as I was when I got the no later on with the second job that I had interviewed for. If you're still here, understand this. You were never weak for losing. You were brave for trying. Keep taking the losses. They're shaping the version of you that can't be stopped. I'm your host, Jonathan Brown, and thank you for listening to another episode of the Reality Roundtable. And we'll be back with another episode next week at 12 p.m. Have a good day.